Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for joining us for the presentation today. We're just going to allow a few moments here for attendees to start to roll in. So just give us a quick minute or so, and we'll get up and running at that point. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get rolling here today on today's edition of the Building Smart Energy Efficient Essentials for Modern Homes series. My name again is Chris McTaggart for those who haven't joined us thus far. Today we're going to be kind of doing part two about our series on HERS ratings as a design tool for prospecting improvements in energy efficiency in residential homes. So today we're going to be kind of focusing on, if we were going to use the new homes program incentives through consumers and DTE, how might we go about targeting improvements that would make our homes more efficient and also get us the best bang for our buck for incentives through the program. So we're going to go ahead and roll into it today. So again, we'll just do it for those who have maybe not been at every presentation. Why are we even doing energy efficiency? How does the HERS index figure into that equation? And then again, can we use the incentives through DTE and Consumers Residential New Homes programs in order to help to guide us to designing and constructing more energy efficient homes? Again, if you haven't joined us previously, we've been teaching this webinar, this series, this whole summer and going back into spring. I am Chris McTaggart. I'm the president of Building Efficiency Resources. We are a national ResNet quality assurance and training provider organization. We work with about 500 certified ResNet professionals all around the country, with several based here in the state of Michigan. I myself am from the great city of Detroit, living here in the city, and I have been all over the state, went to school in East Lansing, Michigan State for college. Sorry if you're a Go Blue fan or potentially a Broncos fan after this past weekend, but I've been all over the state of Michigan, West Coast, up north, Upper Peninsula, all over. You've heard the spiel if you've been on these before. The state of Michigan has a pretty, wide range of, sort of moderate cold to pretty darn tootin' cold types of climates here. If you go all the way up to the UP, we've got climate zones 5 through 7. So, how you build and how you're going to achieve, making a more energy efficient homes, it really kind of just depends on where you are in the state. And we're going to try to speak to those examples here today. So rolling into it, energy efficiency. Why does it matter? Well, folks, it matters more than ever. I would say if you listen to the news about the demands of energy consumption in this country, we're consuming more than ever before. And I think it's easy to maybe go, oh, well, then this whole efficiency thing, it's just a drop in the bucket. No, it's like one of the most critical resources. Because here it is, the energy that we don't have to consume is money not spent by consumers, not spent by businesses. The utilities, I don't want to speak for them, but they've got lots of high energy consuming customers that they have to serve here with data centers and indoor agricultural outfits here in the state of Michigan, if you catch my drift. Obviously, it's a business here, but the DTE and consumers there are obviously committed to energy efficiency as a principal guiding force to helping them achieve their goals as a business to serve Michigan as businesses. Because here's the deal: if nobody can afford to live in their house because they're so energy inefficient, you're not going to be able to keep customers. So, that's why DT and consumers have these programs, is to really help promote people having a higher quality of life in their homes. Having buildings that are durable and comfortable and healthier and more energy efficient. And using the HERS system, the home energy rating system, is a quantifiable method to be able to assess the energy performance of a building. And it's scalable. And when I mean scalable, I don't just mean like we're able to mobilize it because we have HERS raters in the state. That is true. We do have a fair amount of HERS raters in the state that can meet that demand to do HERS ratings. But beyond that, the scalable insofar as the HERS index is really pretty agnostic, both in terms of the size of home as well as the methods that you take in order to achieve energy efficiency in your project. So the HERS index makes a lot of sense for the utilities to be specified as the minimum benchmarks for participation in their new homes programs. So, why would someone even get going with the HERS index? Well, somebody actually contacted me on LinkedIn the other day and said, I saw a big production builder in the state of Michigan is labeled as a ResNet Energy Smart Builder. Is that true? Is that a fair label for them to say that they're an energy smart builder? Because it seems like they're doing a lot of production oriented home building. And what I kind of responded with was, isn't it better that they're getting their homes rated whether or not, they're exceptionally high performance passive homes or not? And I would argue it is better. It's better for the builder, it's better for the consumer, because people know what they're getting. And they have a way of then doing their own comparison. Imagine every builder got their home rated. Wow, we would really then have a marketplace where consumers could maybe compare apples to apples. If you had two homes with almost the same square footage and design and number of bedrooms, number of baths, and relatively the same location, and one scores a 55, the other one scores a 65, and if they cost about the same, you might be inclined to go with the one that scores a 55, perhaps. So that's the goal, is that it'd be great, and that's why we're having this webinar series, sponsored by DTE and Consumers Energy, because the utilities would love to have every home in the state of Michigan participating in the program. Why? Well, because that way, we have assurance that people buying new construction are having proven lowered operating costs, and that builders are able to take advantage of the incentives available, and it helps to ensure, again, that people have better recognition of what this stuff is, and that's kind of better for everybody. If every home in the state ended up getting a HERS rating, that would give us a good benchmark of where we are. And no matter what happens with the future of energy code, boy, it would give the ability for the utilities to continue to set incrementally more aggressive targets so as to incentivize and reward builders who are willing to take the next step. So that's really why this HERS index as a strategy matters. It's achievable. Oftentimes builders can use a HERS rater for energy code compliance verification, and at the same time, the rater can produce a HERS index. So there's economies of scale that come with the HERS process. So it kind of makes a lot of sense for everybody. So, getting into it as a design tool, again, the HERS index, it's an asset rating, meaning that it's not an absolute consumption rating. It's not like a, it's not like an EUI, an energy utilization intensity. It's not like, BTUs consumed per square foot of the house. It's more appropriate as an efficiency metric because it really compares apples to apples. If we're building a 2,500 square foot house, it's compared against a 2,500 square foot house. If I'm building a 10,000 square foot house, it's being compared against a 10,000 square foot house. If I'm building a 1,000 square foot house, it's being compared against a 1,000 square foot house. And so it makes it more comparable, apples to apples, when we're looking at efficiency. So that way, because I mean, look, obviously a 1,000 square foot house is probably going to consume less energy than a 10,000 square foot house. Duh. Well, that makes all the sense in the world. Why? Because there's substantially less building enclosure that has to be heated and cooled, to keep people comfortable, compared to the 10,000 square foot house, which is going to have, practically 10 times as much surface area to have heat loss off of it. And so, the problem though is that most people, they're not making decisions about the home that they want based off of the absolute energy usage. That's pretty rare. If so, go get yourself a tiny home, because you're probably going to be able to heat it with a hair dryer. But somebody who wants a 10,000 square foot house, they're comparing the 10,000 square foot house to other similar sized homes. They're not likely to go and say, yeah, I'm going to go get a 1,000 square foot house because it uses less energy. So the HERS index is very useful because, again, it's an apples to apples comparison, same square footage, same location, same number of bedrooms. And so you've got, the reference home, which is a 2006 era home, that is being compared to the rated home. And for every point reduction, on the HERS index, that's 1% energy savings versus that reference home. So, it's more useful using the HERS index if you're a builder, because that, if you have, let's just say in your portfolio of homes that you build, you have the 1,500 square foot model, but you also have the 5,000 square foot model. The reality is, if you build it to the same kind of level of specifications, you should probably be getting pretty close to the exact same score. Because again, it's an apples to apples, sort of same size, same shape, same number of bedrooms type of comparison. So that way, you don't build the subdivision and say, well, your 1,500 square foot homes look a lot more attractive than your larger 5,000 square foot homes, which, obviously you're probably going to sell with a little bit more of a premium. So there's a lot of value to the HERS index for that reason. Obviously you can get all the way down to a 0, and wouldn't that be cool as a home builder? Be able to stamp a HERS 0 on the home's electric panel, make the consumer sort of, understand that they've got a net zero home. That'd be great. But overall, just having a HERS index here in Michigan that's below 100 actually tells you something pretty good, because here in the state of Michigan, we have a pretty old building stock overall. We've got a lot of homes that, if you were to take my home when I first bought it here in the city of Detroit, 1927, definitely not the oldest home in the state of Michigan, probably somewhere, towards one of the older homes, but, we got homes dating back to the 1800s in Michigan, or maybe even before then sometimes. But, long story short, our development arc made it so that we had a lot of homes built, in like the 1950s and before. And so that was before insulation and airtightness or really good mechanical systems. That wasn't really a big thing, because energy was pretty cheap and people weren't thinking about environmental consequences. People's concept of comfort was, I think, a little bit less specific. People were just excited to come out from the farmhouses, where maybe they had a fireplace or a wood stove and that was it. So, people had, operable heating or, oh man, air conditioning. That was a big deal in the state of Michigan. People over time they're becoming more acclimated and accustomed and expecting of greater levels of comfort in a home. So, anyways, for all these reasons, scoring below 100, that's pretty good. Again, another good reason to get your homes rated because compared to what's out there in the marketplace, existing resale homes, a home builder can really show the market advantage, the difference and distinction between its competition out there in the marketplace. Again, a typical older home, it ranges, 130, 150, look, if somebody, I don't want to say that every old home scores poorly. I myself have done a lot of renovations to my home. I've added insulation, I've increased air tightness, I've put new windows in, I've put new mechanicals in. So, my home scores below 100 at this point, even though it's from 1927. But like when I first bought it, again, not a stitch of insulation in the whole house. Close to 15 air changes an hour, and inefficient mechanical systems in original windows. So, man, I was scoring above 150 on the HERS index. I didn't have very much going for me. 100, the home built to the 2006 IECC, with federal minimum equipment of that era, that's what 100 is. Today, in order to meet minimum standards of compliance within the state of Michigan, a lot of builders are using the performance methodology of the 2015 Michigan Code. And let's just say there's a couple of modifying factors in Michigan's version of the 2015 code that allow for practices that you'd be kind of surprised are eligible to still meet code compliance using the performance path. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But long story short, if you're someone who's just trying to basically get by with code compliance and that nothing more, you might be scoring somewhere in the 70s or even 80s on the HERS index in Michigan. So, to get up to Energy Star version 3.1, which is our statewide version of Energy Star, and if you're going to participate in the new homes programs, you have to at least get on board with version 3.1. You're going to be somewhere in the 55 to 65 range. If you want to take that next jump with Energy Star, so that could be version 3.2, version 3.3, or next gen. Then we're scoring in the 45 to 55. Zero energy rating homes through the Department of Energy would be in the 40s. FIAS or PHI, passive homes, they're going to score somewhere in the 30s to the 40s. And this was all prior to considering solar panels on the home. So then, obviously it would be great to take that zero energy ready home or that passive home and go ahead and stick some solar panels on it, because boy, you'd basically be able to get all the way down to a HERS zero to become a net zero home. And that would really be fabulous if we could achieve that. You may be looking at those numbers and say, well, if Michigan a minimum code is a 70 or an 80, man, we may not be doing that well on the HERS index as a state. And, the reality is we're doing okay. In the US, there was about 440,000 homes rated last year. And in Michigan, there was 5,000, a little bit of a modest element of the HERS marketplace, but hey, we're in the game. We score a little bit higher overall compared to the average HERS index across the United States. Part of that probably has to do with that we have an energy code that's a little bit less superlative. But that being said, there's only 5,000 HERS ratings in Michigan last year. There was more homes that were built, to be certain. So there's a lot of homes that are probably out there they're getting built that aren't getting scored. And so again, the 70s, 80s, those minimum compliant homes with the code, they're not necessarily getting HERT scores because the builder hasn't yet sort of been motivated to do so. But it would be good to get all homes to get rated at some point, because then we'd have a true average, and they would give DTE and consumers a better benchmark from which to develop and maintain their new homes program off of. So the HERS index calculation is done via a standard, the ResNet 301 standard. It is now actually in version 2022 if you have a brand new home that goes in the ground today. The calculation includes heating, cooling, water heating, lights and appliances, and on-site power production. All of that data goes into an energy modeling software. And so the things that are going into it, again, heating, cooling, and water heating systems, the equipment itself, and then their distribution systems. So duct systems, hot water distribution systems, if they have insulation on the piping or just better design or possibly some form of recirculation. Performance testing, infiltration, that's blower door testing, duct leakage using a duct blaster or duct tester, ventilation testing. Homes are supposed to have ventilation in the state of Michigan. HVAC rating is another option for performance testing. All of our insulated assemblies, so our foundation walls, slabs or frame floors, rim and band joists, above grade walls, windows and doors and ceilings. These are all assemblies that get put into the modeling software. Lights and appliances, kind of the cherry on top, and on-site power production, that would be sprinkles on top. So those are all the minimum rated features. The HERS process involves both energy modeling and then on-site verification using a certified rater or rating field inspector. So generally speaking, we're starting with a projected rating. So that's one that's based off of plans with specifications that come from those plans or from whatever the builder intends to put in the home. And then the rater goes out in order to verify that the home is actually built to plans. There weren't any additions or changes to windows or foundations or things like that. So, and then we also confirm, are the specs actually, what the builder thought they were going to do, that's actually what's going in the house. So things that can change are, the insulation material can change. A builder thinks they're going to put in R21, but it turns out that they're actually putting in R19. Okay, well, that changes the rating. They thought they were putting in a 95% furnace, and we get out there and it's a 97% furnace. So it can swing in both directions, and so all of those as verified components help to go and true up that projected rating so we can do a confirmed rating. And confirmed rating is basically including all of the as verified, actually installed minimum rated features that went inside of the home. And that's what helps us get our confirmed rating. Once that's done, then it's submitted to a ResNet provider and is subject to quality assurance review. And then there's a final reporting element that goes into this to the builder so that they can help to advertise that home or to submit it to DTE and Consumers Energy for incentives. There are three main software tools in our industry and possibly a couple others that are coming on the market. And so those three tools are Ecotrope, RemRate, and Energy Gauge. Both DTE and Consumers Energy leverage Ecotrope for their reporting to the utility. So even if you use one of these other softwares, they'll take the inputs and ultimately, translate them into Ecotrope so that they can get that information. The main thing that these software programs do is they estimate annual energy consumption, heating and cooling loads. They can do a cost effectiveness if that's something that you're interested in. And ultimately they'll help to spit out the HERS index score as well as compliance with things like energy codes, and then above code programs like Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready Homes. And so the value here is it provides a really clear pathway to optimize design before construction. So again, doing the projected rating, it allows you to say, okay, here's where you're planning on. But imagine if we changed a few things, could you start to get into the level of participation in the DTE or Consumers New Homes program? Wouldn't that be great? So, again, HERS Index, it's not just a score. You have an opportunity, if you're a savvy builder, to kind of plan for the future. Are there things that you can do to help to project, okay, here's where I am today. I'm building in the 60s, but I know eventually that Michigan's probably going to change its energy codes, and maybe I'm going to have to score somewhere in the low 50s. Well, if I'm at a 65 today, and I know I got to get down to the low 50s here in a couple of years, wouldn't it be nice to kind of ramp up and use the HERS 59 or 60 in DTE territory as a benchmark for me to kind of up my game and get halfway there? So I can work with my HERS rater to start to do some cost and benefit analysis, And I think everybody initially goes, well, I guess I got to add a lot more insulation. And I can just say, that's not the case. With a HERS index, that could be an option, but you don't have to necessarily increase insulation in order to achieve compliance with a better HERS index score. So you can work with your HERS rater to look at different things, potentially improving the efficiency of your heating and cooling system or water heating system, possibly speccing out Energy Star windows, perhaps, making the building more airtight through a more purposeful air sealing package, and then adding really good quality ventilation. There's a lot of different ways that you can go ahead and make improvements. Could you think about, how can I make this home? Not every builder is going to think about it this way, but you could look at your home and say, how do I set up this home so that even if I'm not making it the most energy efficient, how can I set it up so that the consumer could in the future? Well, that might be actually done through a better building enclosure. And so maybe you as a builder decide that you want to make that investment so that the home is nice, tight, and comfortable and resilient, so that in the future, a homeowner may be able to do something like add on-site power production, and then they're all taken care of. But other things is, you can think about just better HVAC systems, really dialing in your heating and cooling equipment so that the consumer is getting the best bang for the buck with their comfort distribution system inside the house. So looking at the incentives, we've talked a lot about them. We got one message that came in here. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it. Yeah, and that's the whole thing, about the HERS index is, and again, I know I'm sounding like I'm being a salesperson here, but I've been in this industry a long time, and a lot of people have different opinions about the HERS index and how great it is or not that great. But the thing that I really like about it is that there's something there for everybody. If you're a builder that's, you've been using the same plan sets for 10 years and you don't really want to change your plan sets, and maybe you have a certain type of framing system that you've been using, you're using 2x4 walls. Let's just call it the way it is. In Michigan, we have a lot of builders still building with 2x4s. Guess what? It's okay. It's fine. You can do that, and you don't necessarily have to spray foam the walls full of closed cell foam, nor do you necessarily have to wrap the walls in continuous insulation. I think those practices are great. I think better building enclosures are valuable. They can help keep people really comfortable. Think about the Yeti cooler again. Why does everybody love the Yeti? Well, because it keeps your drinks really cold for a really long time, or alternatively, it keeps your soup or your coffee really hot for a really long time. And consumers love that. Why do they love that? Well, because it's predictable, it's reliable. You know that if you fill up that mug full of coffee, you're going to be able to have a nice, warm beverage here in a couple hours, even if it's sitting in your truck, in 10-degree January weather. And there's something to love about that. Guess what? Houses can be built that way. That's what Passive House tries to achieve with having a more airtight, more well insulated enclosure. You can keep that heat trapped inside so that people don't have to spend more money heating their home. That's an option. I love better building enclosures. I also get it that if you're a home builder that's been doing things a certain way and your plans are set up a certain way and you're working with subcontractors that you've been working with for decades, that yeah, you may not be prepared to do it all at one time. Maybe you're not ready to add a super insulated building enclosure. That's okay. That's the value of the HERS index. And that's the value of these incentive programs through DTE and Consumers Energy, because they can, again, really give you a motivation for a way to up your game. If you're a code compliant only builder and you want to plan for the future, you want to help to give your consumers who are going to purchase your homes a little bit of information about them and to show that you care about energy efficiency, using the utility incentives is a really great way to go about it. So is the federal tax credit, the 45L tax credit, which is based off of Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready homes. Obviously, if you hadn't heard the news, those are set to expire as of the end of June of next year. So if you want to get in on the tax credit, you better get in while the getting's good. Because there's no guarantee that it will be coming back around in the future. We'll have to see about that. You never know. Congress and the federal administration could have a change of heart at some point in time. But for right now, you can get in on the 45L basically for the next 3 quarters or so. Look, I don't think that everybody should necessarily make decisions about home building based off of incentives. But again, it gives you a little bit of a motivation to start working with a HERS rater, get a relationship going with them, help utilize them as a form of technical support. You can start to model out and project your homes over the future, because if you're building homes, you probably want to keep building homes, even if the market changes. And let's just say the market gets a little bit tighter at some point. Man, wouldn't it be nice to have something that stands out in the marketplace? Something that you could really hang your hat on and say, my home is different, and that's why you should buy it. I think is a really important value. So, okay, so getting into the incentive programs, let's start with DTE first. So for DTE, in order to get in the door with the incentive program, you have to get at least a HERS index of 60. So that's sort of the minimum threshold for participation, is that HERS 60, and you can get up to $2,100 by achieving a HERS 60 if you're just doing a standard HERS index rating, or $2,450 for Energy Star. It's a performance-based incentive, so the modeling software spits out exactly what your rebate is based off of your savings and some of the bonus eligibility measures. So it's not quite as straightforward as get a HERS 60 and you get $2,100, but it could be, depending. You have to work with a rater in order to figure out exactly what incentive you'll be eligible for once you're able to start doing some projective modeling. If you are able to build a higher performance home, such as a HERS 45 or better, then you're in the running for $3,500 or potentially up to $3,850 if you're doing Energy Star. So again, this sort of depends on what your actual savings are. So start to work with a HERS rater. If you want to tackle those higher levels of incentives, you have to be using a cold climate heat pump. And basically at that point, then you're eligible for these higher levels of incentives if you hit a HERS 45. Not for everybody, but there's a lot of consumers that might be interested in putting in a heat pump in a new home. And so, hey, look, practically $4,000. That's a pretty good incentive, I'd say, in order to go all the way all electric. This is that bonus incentive table from DTE. Again, I don't want to get too in the details about this, but basically the way this works is that, say that we're putting in that cold climate air source heat pump. Well, if we put in a 10 plus HSPF unit with a 19 SEER cooling rating, that would get us $850. We could also then, say we want to really tighten up the home and have a home that's 2 ACH 50. Well, that would get us an extra 275. And then let's, if we're going to have a really airtight home, we should probably have good ventilation. So we're going to go ahead and add an ERV or an HRV. In our climate, I'd say skip the HRV, just put in an ERV. Makes more sense. And so that way, then you get $250. So, that's kind of how these work. So both you get these sort of bonus incentives depending on the measure, but then also savings based off of the actual performance of the home. So that's kind of how it works. And then if you're Energy Star, then you get an additional bonus on top of that. So here's a little bit of a run through here. If you get confirmed MCF savings of 55, confirmed kilowatt hour savings of 1,500, a 96 AFUE furnace, a tankless gas water heater of 0.82 or better, and a 3.25 ACH 50 and 100% LED lighting. Here you go, $1,800 back to the builder. And so, hey, the builder got a HERS 60 on the nose. They had 2x4 walls. They didn't think that they would be able to qualify for any incentives because they didn't think their house was really going to look that good on the HERS index because they had 2x4 walls, R15. Guess what, builder? You can, in fact, get into participating with DTE at a HERS 60 level and get credit for all these really good measures you are putting in your home, even if your insulation package isn't necessarily, it's superlative. Even if you're not building a passive house, that's okay. We might say building a Yeti cooler would be a good idea, but you didn't. That's okay. You can still participate in the program. Consumers. Pretty similar. You have to get a 59 in order to participate with consumers. So that's kind of your gateway into the program. And the incentives are a little bit more modest at that level. But it will help you start the process of working with a HERS rater. And so it's not nothing. You definitely get some money in order to start getting going with participation here. With HERS only, basically, you can get up to $1,000 for doing a HERS rating, basically. But that you have to get to a 55 or less for that. If you are getting into the levels of 55 or less and you want a bigger incentive, you got to get Energy Star certified as well. And then you can get up to $4,000 per home. So, it really does give you a benefit of kind of getting up to there. So, just a quick message from some of the folks at ICF, which is just saying if you're getting up and going with the program, just realize that these incentives they change every year. And so you probably want to get with your account rep from DTE or consumers to get the most up-to-date incentive levels if you're watching this in retrospective. So imagine for 2026, there'll probably be slightly different numbers here, but you get the idea of where we're heading here. So again, Energy Star homes, that's going to give you more incentive level in the state of Michigan under consumers. So again, here's a 59 home that is certified to Energy Star. And, basically under this example, you get $1,000 under this example. So, it gives us a way to start to get in the door with the utility and ramping up. Again, before maybe you were not really doing any type of PERS ratings. Maybe you're just doing minimum code compliance, and so using the utility program, it can help us sort of project where we're going. Again, I heard something about how Michigan may adopt the 2021 IECC, but the builders are really pushing for the 2024. Who knows? Maybe the 2024 will win out. Well, guess what? You're going to need a HERS index somewhere in the low 50s if you choose to use the ERI method for code. So why not start looking to the future, get yourself halfway there, something to feel good about and sort of strike to the future with. For this year through consumers, and you got to wrap up this year. You have to wrap up this year if you're going to participate in these bonus incentives through a pilot program with consumers. There are bonus incentives for Energy Star Next Gen, DOE, Zero Energy Ready Homes, and Passive House or PHI. Wow, look at that. $20,000 for a passive house. That is a really exciting incentive. And if you're able to wrap up before June 30th of next year, then you're potentially eligible for a 45L tax credit as well. So there's a lot of benefits here to get in with the utility and start striving for these higher levels of performance as well. Again, the 45L has the benefit of potentially getting $2,500 per home or $5,000 if you're doing zero energy ready homes. If you're doing multifamily, there are incentives as well, although multifamily has it depends on what's the configuration is, if that really qualifies for DTE or consumers, which is really more geared towards single family homes and townhomes and duplexes. And again, I just got a little bit of an update here from ICF. The folks at ICF mentioned that our bonus program that we just mentioned is now closed to new participants. So hopefully you got in and pre-registered for this bonus program. Okay, so how do I participate in these incentive programs? So, first of all, you got to become a participating builder. You have to choose a HERS rater because you can't just enroll as a builder and that's it. You have to work with a HERS rater. Basically, you're gonna get with your HERS rater to get your plans modeled up. And it's okay. So we did that, and my home's coming in at a 65. Well, darn it, I want to participate in DTE and Consumers Energy programs. I know that if I'm in mixed territory, say I'm building maybe somewhere in Oakland County, Michigan, where we've got DTE for electric and consumers for gas. Well, I know that I'm going to have to get to a 59 if I want to participate in both of those programs. So how do I get there, HERS rater? How do I get there most cost effectively? And maybe the rater says, well, let's just tighten down on your air tightness and make sure your ventilation system's actually installed and working. That may be enough to get you there, to be honest. And then, the rater goes out and does their on-site inspections and testing. And then once the home is finalized with the confirmed rating, it can be submitted to the utility program for incentives. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into some examples here. Using the HERS index as a sort of target for success. Again, we want to set a target that's compliant. So again, we get with a HERS rater. The HERS rater models up the home as is, comes back at a 65. We got to get at least a 60 or maybe a 59 if we're in mixed territory. How do I get there? And a couple of things. Can you optimize your building enclosure? Can you go from R13 walls to R15 walls? That will make a difference. Can you go from R38 in the attic to R49 in the attic? That could make a difference. Could you choose better performing windows? Those things all make a difference. Or maybe just, you're not really wanting to change your insulation package, but maybe you can go from a 90 AFUV furnace to a 95 AFUV furnace. That would be enough to get you up and running in the door, possibly with a better HERS index score. Um, how about prioritizing air sealing and duct sealing? So, if we have a home that, all homes could benefit from more air sealing. Don't let anybody tell you different. If they tell you any different, say, how about that Canadian wildfire smoke, right? We certainly don't want all those particulates coming in our home. I have a brand new baby girl just born this year. Man, I really don't want her to be subject to Canadian wildfire smoke. That's not fair to her and her longevity. I want to set her up for a nice long life, and being exposed to as little smoke as possible is a recipe for success for health. And so, I want to button up my home, and then I want to have good ventilation because that's important. If I've got ducts running outside conditioned space, I want to make sure those ducts are well sealed. Even if they are in conditioned space, I still want them to be well sealed. So we can do some things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but can have a big bang on the HERS index. And we can see those changes in HERS modeling software tools. And the sooner you get up and running with a HERS rater, the better. Get up and running day one. If you decide that you want to participate in these programs, it's a good idea for you to have the rater do a projected analysis to see where you are. You never know. You may be qualifying for incentives without doing anything extra. From day number one, you could be, basically scoring potentially in the range that allows you to participate in DTE and Consumers Energy without having to do anything. Wouldn't that be nice? And then you can maybe start to look towards the even better incentive levels for your next batch of homes. So again, it's important to understand the HERS index. I've sort of said this multiple times, but there's not one right way to do the HERS index. You can improve the HERS index through building enclosure methods like improving air sealing, insulation, better windows. You can have better HVAC systems, lights and appliances are a way. And solar PV is an option too, although I will say for DT and Consumers New Homes program, using solar panels doesn't count to lower your HERS index for the purpose of the program. So keep that in mind. But all these things will lower your HERS index. It's ultimately agnostic. So here's an example. We've got a 3,200 square foot, 3-bedroom house. Seems like pretty standard single family home. And here it scores at an 84 on the HERS index. And you may go, wow, an 84, that's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It basically meets the Michigan Performance Code by 0.1%. So those who have been in the industry a long time ago, we used to have Energy Star version 2. And to participate in Energy Star version 2, which was active from like 2006 until 2012, you had to score an 85 on the HERS index. So this tells you something. This home, as constructed, just barely meets the Michigan Performance Code. Is just a hair better than Energy Star version 2. So that's kind of base Michigan code. Like the worst thing you can build in the state of Michigan, just about, is kind of like Energy Star version 2. So what does this home have? It's got a 90% furnace. That's not bad. 13 SEER AC, that's fine. We don't have a lot of air conditioning. Kind of a basic tank gas water heater. Somebody ran out and did a blower door test. You got 4.5 ACH50, which is above the prescriptive level of air tightness in Michigan, which is 4. But when you use the performance method, you can actually go above that 4. For ventilation, you had exhaust only fans, bath fans set to run continuously. Ducts are 50% in the attic exposed with 4% leakage to outside. Our above grade walls R13, attic R38, foundation walls R10, windows basically code minimum windows, and then basic federal minimum appliances and lighting. So what that kind of tells you is the builder didn't put a whole lot of money towards insulation or air sealing. They didn't really think about where their ducts were going, and all their equipment is just fine. It's fine, you know, it's perfectly fine. This is a code compliant home. It meets the minimum level of LED lighting by the code. There's nothing about this home that you can say is a bad home. It's just fine. It scores compliant with Michigan's performance code, so you can't really complain about it necessarily. But it's certainly kind of far away from where we're trying to get with our HERS index targets for the program. So how can we make some changes that are simple changes that could help the builder participate? Okay, all right, so now we made some modifications using our HERS rater to score to a 59. All right, how did we do that? Well, we got a better furnace and air conditioner. So, the builder talked to their mechanical contractor and said, can you get me a better mechanical package that won't break the bank? And so they went for a 97% AFUE furnace, 14 SEER AC, a better gas water heater. We got a power vented gas water heater. The builder invested in a air sealing package and then optimized their ventilation. Before they actually were over ventilating, and then using a HERS reader, they realized we didn't actually need all that much ventilation. So we actually were able to modify and reduce down our ventilation rate because we just didn't need that much. We buried ducts in an attic. So those 50% of our ducts that were in the attic, instead of just letting them be exposed in the attic, we actually buried them under insulation, which practically costs nothing because you're just having your insulation installer basically blow over the top of them. And ask the HVAC contractor to tighten up a little bit on the leakage outside. And so the ducts are now tighter. Above grade walls, we increased the above grade walls to an R15 from an R13. And then we put in slightly better windows, an Energy Star compliant window that has a moderately better U factor, but a pretty good SHGC level, 100% LED lighting. And then the builder realized he could get an Energy Star appliance package for practically the same amount of money as their other appliance package. And so they went ahead and put Energy Star appliances in. So now the home is minimally compliant with the levels necessary to achieve the HERS index for the purpose of DTE and Consumers Energy's program. So I consider this to be a big win. And the big thing that I'm going to point out here is that the builder did not change their framing package. They did not really change the insulation on the home hardly. They modestly increased the R value on the above grade walls from an R13 to an R15, but they didn't have to go do a 2x6 wall. They didn't have to add continuous insulation. They didn't have to blow the whole cavity full of closed cell foam. Now, all those would have been potentially good things, but they didn't have to. They were able to do other things, and some of them were entirely budgetarily neutral. Ventilation, they just, by working with a HERS rater to dial in what they were doing, basically they were able to, achieve a better HERS score basically for nothing in that regard, just by being smarter about their implementation. Let's say that the builder now is like, okay, I feel like I can do this. What if I wanted to get in the game with doing Energy Star and getting one of those better incentives via Consumers Energy? So under this scenario, the Energy Star index target is a 54. And so the builder was able to work with their rater in order to change the water heater to a tankless gas unit, and then go ahead and spray foam those 2x4 walls, thick, full of high density foam, blow in R49 in the attic, and then increase the foundation wall insulation levels. And now we're at a 54 on the index. So That's a big improvement. And now, hey, we got a better performing building enclosure and we have better hot water distribution. Now we're starting to get someplace. I'm feeling pretty good as a builder about the product I'm putting out there for my customer. People are going to be nice and cozy inside this home, and I'm going to feel really good about it. All right, what else could we do? Let's say we really wanted to swing for the fences and go for that HERS 45 level of incentive tier through DTE or consumers. And say we had gotten our application in earlier to go for this pilot program with consumers to get to go for DOE zero energy ready homes. It would also make us eligible for the 45L tax credit at the highest level. And so the target for zero energy ready homes is a 47. Our home is coming in at a 45. So the way we were able to take this same 3-bedroom home was to get it to have a cold climate heat pump, a 10.5 HSPF heat pump plus a 19 SEER air conditioner. And then we put in a heat pump water heater, and button down our air tightness to 1.5 ACH 50, and then put in an ERV with pretty good performance, the right amount of ventilation, the right amount of watts, good sensible heat recovery. And then for our above grade walls, we decided to go back to our R15, but we did R10 continuous. Now we're here at that HERS 45 level. And we're feeling pretty good about, again, the quality of the product that we're giving to our consumer using this. So you'll notice that all these green dollar signs, that indicates some of those bonus incentive levels using DTE's methodology, which can help us get the highest amount of rebate back. Again, if we were in consumers territory though, and if we had applied to participate in that pilot program, you could get $10,000 for being a zero energy ready home, and then $5,000 for the 45L tax credit. So not a bad incentive. If not, if you weren't able to get in necessarily with that pilot program, you'd at least be eligible for 3150 using consumers, as we're at a 41 to a 45 on the index. We're Energy Star compliant, and we have an ACH 50 value that gets us $150. So here's kind of just a little bit of an example, of how this charts out in terms of performance versus the Michigan Performance Home. So the Michigan Performance Code, our first example, HERS 84, we just barely passed 0.1%. That 59, about 30% better. Our 54, about 35% better. And our all electric example was about 60% better than the performance code. And in terms of savings, well, that 84, basically we're saving $8 a year, not really saving any money. Getting to a 59, hey, we're putting, $570 back in people's pocket. That's about $50 a month back in people's pocket. That's pretty good. As a consumer, I would love to have a bill that cost me $50 paid for with savings through my utilities. 54, that much better. And then the HERS 45 level, man, I'm saving $1,500 a year. That's over $100 a month. That's really exciting if I'm a consumer to be able to know that I can have, $120 or so bill paid for every single month just through utility savings. That's exciting. So, in summary, HERS, it's more than a label, it's a design strategy. You can use this in order to incrementally improve your home and kind of plan for the future. It doesn't have to be super expensive. You don't have to change the way you build fundamentally. There's a lot of opportunities through these programs to get some money kicked back to you while you're building a better home. But if you're going to do it, you should plan early and set a course. I'm here right now. How do I get in the door with these incentive programs and then look to the future for even better performance somewhere down the line? Okay, well, that's a wrap. We are going to be coming back here soon with a beginning introduction to the Energy Star program. So we've talked a fair amount about Energy Star homes, but we haven't really taken a deep dive on it. So we will be back in order to talk about Energy Star single family new homes program and participation with DTE and consumers next week. All right, we'll talk to you then. Thank you very much, folks.